Hello, I am Tirna Sengupta. I have a bachelor's in English from Lady Shri Ram College, a master's in English from University of Delhi, and I have very recently finished my PhD on Adivasi culture and performance in North Bengal at the University of Leeds, where I received a full scholarship to do my doctoral research. It's been 2 months that I've started teaching at Salesian College, and I'm an assistant professor of English here. And I want to talk to you about my experience of teaching English here in the classroom and tell you a little bit about what we do in that discipline, if that's a mystery at all. I began my lectures here by asking my students, different cohorts of students, why English? Why are you here? What made you make this choice? And the answer surprised me a little. I think I was being led by my teacher training in Leeds a little bit to ask them this question. But it doesn't always work in the Indian classroom in the same way. Not every student is making a very individual or passionate decision to study the discipline. They're often here for a degree, and their expectations from the course are varied, myriad, and sometimes quite perplexing as well. So there begins my orientation. There's nothing that riles up English professors more than the students saying, "Ma'am, I thought it would be an easy degree." And I get that answer a lot. I get that answer from my students a lot. That I thought it would be easy. It wouldn't be difficult. It doesn't really disturb me to think that. I think a degree should be easy. I don't want my students to suffer. There's no glory in that. So today in this lecture, I want to talk to you about what is easy in English, what I hope is easy in English, and what might be challenging. I like to see my students find belonging. What's really easy for me as a teacher to see is that the dilettantes find belonging, the disruptors who felt like they're always outcasts in society find a cause to dedicate their energy. And the people who felt really alone find companionship and a sort of friendship with their texts and what they are reading. But what's challenging about literature is it sometimes deals with the larger questions of life, things that we grapple with as a society, especially with war and technology surrounding us. In literature, we think deeply about the meaning of existence, the agony of loss, passions, and we think about everything from personal choices like sexuality to nationalism, and all of these things that come in between. Now, a lot of professors of English think about how to not make this subject easy, how to make it difficult. I'm not one of them. Often they think about, how do I prove a certain proximity to the sciences? So even with the coming of the digital humanities, I feel like a lot of us English professors are masquerading as scientists or computer scientists. I think the power of literature lies in how it gives importance to emotions in inquiries, in intellectual inquiries. I always tell my students that literature is not a place for you to demonstrate personal intelligence or to be better than anyone else. I don't get better or worse students. I get critical students, and I get some students who are on their own journey of unlearning a lot of social conventions that they have been pressured into. So I come back to emotions. I think emotions are a tool of learning. And I've got Sarah Ahmed on my side, someone I teach in my literary theory class, who says that emotions are not personal. Emotions come out of various things like oppression, the famous feminist rage, for example, feeling angry about things that shouldn't happen, feeling angry about injustice, feeling angry about things not going the right way. And it channels that into something creative, something critical. And that's what I really, really enjoy. But that can be a challenging part of studying English literature. I think about this poem that I want to share a few lines with you. It's written by Naomi Shihab Naeem. She says, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone. I don't go into the whole poem, but what I mean is literature often teaches you to empathize with someone whose position you couldn't ever think of being in. But maybe you're sheltered from that position by privilege. Maybe you're sheltered by something else. But sometimes when you think of something as evil or beneath you, literature teaches you to empathize, to see someone else's story as yours. It takes an unflinching look at violence, whether that's physical, psychological. We all have been through the torments of love. Or if it's identitarian, and it finds the cause for these sufferings, and it resists dehumanization, whether that's through technology or through war. It reinstates these human experiences along with the whole host of emotions that come with it into the center of our studies, rather than prioritizing statistics. You're no longer a number that was lost. You're no longer a number that was killed by bombs, but you are a whole human being. And in a literature classroom, we actually even cull out this suffering, even when it's hidden within texts. A lot of the literary texts that I teach are canonical texts, meaning they have been in the literature syllabus because the people who wrote them were the people who were in power. So sometimes these canonical texts can hide the experiences of marginalized characters, and we actually decipher the sufferings, the anguish, the longings, the experiences, the wholeness of these characters who are hidden in these texts. And that is the job of a literature student. So when we read Shakespeare's Caliban or Othello or Cleopatra, we approach it from a critical race or a post-colonial or even a decolonial perspective. And I always offer to my students texts which have engaged with canonical texts in a way to subvert it. I can think of Amy Césair's response to The Tempest, or Jason Allen Passant's response to Othello. And there's also the famous Wide Sargasso Sea, which takes up the character of Martha Mason in Jane Eyre, and it represents the experience of the Black woman who was shut in the attic by the white husband. And that opens up a whole new side of exploration, which is both feminist and anti-race. Heart of Darkness goes through a similar sort of scrutiny and a similar sort of response when I talk to my students about Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. So the texts that we read are not holy. So what I try to inculcate in students, and what they sometimes struggle with, is that criticality. The author is not God to us in literature. The author is also someone we critique and respond to. And no opinion is silly. I must go to what English came to India as. English literature as a discipline was a colonial import. It was started by the British to sort of train Indians to think a certain way, for them to train our moralities, to train our intellect, to create a class of interpreters. Macaulay's Minutes have been in the news recently, and it has been the subject of political debate. And it was actually that sort of a view of literature written in England by a very aristocratic class, which was supposed to train the moralities, sensibilities of Indians. Now, Audre Lorde says that you can never use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. I'm not quoting her exactly, but that's the gist of it. But I don't know if that's true. Maybe what we do in the classroom isn't effective. Who am I to judge that? But what we do is dismantle these texts and respond to them with vigor. And we challenge not just empires that existed historically, but we also look at empires that are present now. And a lot of our syllabus has now gone through a lot of change. We don't just read dead white men. We actually read a lot of Indian authors. We read authors from the global south. A lot of literature that we study are not even written literature, they're cultural texts. And we study R.K. Narayan, Raja Rao, who really introduced Indian writings in English, to Salman Rushdie's tapestry of magical realism. We also read caste by Phule, Ambedkar, Valmiki, and we think of caste as a structure of colonization that we still suffer from in today's India. So we use these theories that we have around power and disruption of power to analyze various hierarchies, whether that's made by race or caste or class. We also study Adivasi narratives, Hasda Savindra Sekhar, and also their cultural narratives. So basically what we do is we look at supremacies of caste, class, gender, and we subject them to scrutiny, to interrogation. And sometimes my students, the same ones who said, "Ma'am, I thought this would be easy," say, "Oh, this is not easy at all. You've absolutely destroyed literature for us. Now we can no longer enjoy a poem as it was written. We can no longer enjoy a novel as it was written. I used to like reading at one point. Now you have put it all in this sordid mess of politics." I also actually teach them literary theory, which brings in all of these muddy, sordid bits of politics. And I tell them about Raymond Williams, where he argues that literature and culture are actually not ever neutral. They're always constituted by, and they also constitute power structures. Literature is written in a way that either upholds the current politics or it subverts it. And even culture is either dominant or it is subversive. Even innocuous activities like traveling can be upholding certain hierarchies. Who gets to travel? Who gets to tell a story? A perfect example of this would be Jamaica Kincaid's A Small Place, which looks as tourism also as a continuation of colonization. So what I try and tell them is that literature was never meant to be. Literature is never actually neutral. It's not meant to just be. It's always either upholding or subverting something. And I think about the power of stories thus, because a story means someone is either represented, they're either represented with their whole humanness, or they are not. When I think about Palestinian poet Rafat al-Harir's poem, who says, "If I must die, you must live to tell my story." And that is the power of a story, whether that resides in a poem or a play text or in a cultural text, that doesn't matter. That is the power of a story that is told, that is consumed, that is witnessed. So we actually witness the lives of others, and there is power and responsibility that comes along with it. Literature actually helps you see evil as also human, also a part of the whole range of things that we experience, rather than seeing evil as something that we could never potentially be. And to mock it, it actually allows it to take a soft human shape, not to excuse it, but to analyze it, but to have a deep look at it. And I think about Langston Hughes, a Black writer in Harlem in 1951, who talks about the dreams of the Black people in America. And he says, what happens to dreams that are infinitely deferred? He says that they explode. He hints at revolution. And it often does happen. So what do we do? How do we witness the dreams? How do we experience the softness, the promise of the dreams of people who are not allowed to dream? And I see that similarity between Jinza Vedka in Abhishek Majumdar and Langston Hughes. And that's the beauty of a literature classroom, where something happens in India contemporarily actually bears resemblance and resonance to something that has happened in America so long ago, or even before, because empires are also cyclical. And they don't last forever. That's what I tell my students. So it's a message of hope. It is a message of longing. It is a call to arms, not as in real arms, but it is a call to action for people to feel like they have the ability to change things that happen to them. So what I do hope in the end, as a literature teacher, is that I hope empathy comes easily to my students. And I hope when they read a text, they are able to understand the different perspectives, and they don't have to labor to feel how someone else might have felt in a very difficult position. But I also hope that my students never stop asking difficult questions of authorities, of regimes, of people who tell them that they can't be themselves. Right? And I hope that they don't lose that courage to ask those difficult questions, to sit with those difficult emotions, and to form those difficult communities sometimes, powered by unity, powered by a vision of the future. And I hope that they are able to build, however difficult, a more just and equitable world where people and environment are not statistics or numbers, and they're not disposable, but they're whole, and they're worthy of dignity and respect. And that is the difficult part of literature, that I hope everyone watching the lecture, even if you don't actually study the discipline, that's the impact that I want to leave you with. Thank you very much.